Hello, and welcome to the fourth NCS panel Behind the Words, a deeply superficial glance at the members of the Northern Crime Syndicate in a probably vain attempt to find out who they really are, what inspired them to become writers, and how they rose from zero to whatever it is they are now. I'm not saying heroes. Before we start, a little bit of housekeeping. If I point you to the chat, can you make sure if you do get involved in the chat, there's a little box at the bottom and you can tick on an arrow and send the chat to everyone in the meeting. If you could do that, then everybody involved will see what you're asking. That would be great, thank you. Also, we'll be opening the Q&A towards the end here, so you can direct your own questions at all of us about anything you've heard. But keep questions coming in the chat during the panel, and we'll do our best to pick them up as they go along. We're going to start off tonight with all the panelists telling us a truth and a lie about themselves. And I'd like you guys to help me and the other panelists work out which one is the truth and which one is the lie. And I'm going to start with Chris, please.
Okay. So my two things, one, I'm lactose intolerant, and two, I have had some success in amateur theatre, leading about 6 plays now.
Excuse Chris, would you be willing to, as part of this, to pop and get a glass of milk from the fridge? Just
no, because I might be lactose intolerant.
Adam, give us your truth and lie, please.
Right, first one. Stuart McBride once commented on my crotch. And the other one is Val McDermott once told me to F off.
What, literally like that? Val McDermott?
No, I just thought I wouldn't swear in case it goes on YouTube and it causes problems. So PG version tonight.
Adam, you do realise one of them is meant to be a lie, right?
Yeah. I've invented backstories and everything, man.
Robert Scragg, let's hear yours.
So my two things, one of them is that I once forgot to put my regular numbers on the lottery, and I missed out on 5 numbers in the bonus ball, which would have been low 6 figures. And the other thing is that I once was mistaken for a Premiership footballer who's played for Newcastle at the time and signed autographs without fessing up.
Was it a very good Premiership football? Was it like Titus Bramble?
It's all relative. No, it was Keith Gillespie.
Really? Okay. Mr. Parker.
Okay. I was in an a cappella singing group with a pre-famed Dermot O'Leary.
I so want that to be true.
Please.
I'll be watching, Dermot. And I also blagged my way into a Berlin nightclub by pretending to be a Manchester City player.
Big football connection going on here. Now, Judith has completely failed to write hers down, so I have to read these out for her. So let's be clear, everyone. This is not me. This is Judith O'Reilly. When Wife in the North came out, I had an editorial written about me in the Financial Times saying I'd made my husband a figure of national ridicule. Also, when I walked through the entire Penguin offices with my skirt tucked in my knickers when I met my editor to discuss my first book deal. A truth and a lie.
I can't face either of those, Judith.
It's better that Trevor reads them, though. I am a terrible liar.
We've got about 50 minutes to work out which of those is the truth and which of those is the lie. And hopefully maybe some of the questions I'm going to ask these guys will reveal which is which. One of the things people may not realise is that we kind of only started to get together as Northern Crime Syndicate in the last year, and only really started to meet probably just about after Christmas. So I in particular don't know everybody really well, and in fact Chris and I don't think have ever met in real life.
No, we haven't. No.
I think rumour has it we were in the same beer tent at Harrogate at one point. But you can say that about
so.
pretty much any 2 writers in existence. have been in the beer tent at Harrogate, so that doesn't count. So partially this is to help me find out a lot about these guys as well as you. And one of the things I've found out actually is that the Northern Crime Syndicate has an imposter in it. One of us was born in Harlow and brought up in Norwich.
Yeah.
So what are you doing here?
I moved up here when I was 9 years old. My mum works in nursing, and she got a promotion, and she got sent up to Sunderland. So yeah, that's what I'm doing here.
So it's not that the Norfolk Crime Syndicate wouldn't have you, is that?
Well, I used to live in North Walsham, so northern, you know. So
for me, this is a bigger revelation than Obama's birth certificate. I think there's a bigger controversy.
So,
I'm not sure. We need to talk about this off screen, probably, guys.
Yeah.
And Rob Parker, born in Manchester, but a Liverpool supporter. How does that work for you?
Yeah, my mum's from Merseyside, so dad's from sort of Stockport Cheadle way. Mum's from Merseyside. It was the 80s. Obviously, fell in love watching a lot of Liverpool when I was a little fella. So yeah.
And what was it like at school?
Well, in Warrington, I mean, we've talked about this a couple of times, but because I went to school in Warrington, and that's directly between the Liverpool and Manchester, so you get half and half, you know. But it used to be more Liverpool fans in the early 80s, and then it changed, and then from the 90s right the way through the 2000s, everyone was a United fan. So it's good to see the tide turn a little bit again.
And Adam and Robert are two only pure Northeasterners, really. Judith, I didn't know you were from Leeds.
Yeah, but in the northeast they don't regard that as being northern.
That's why I was wondering what you were doing here as well, really, because it's obviously.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm afraid Yorkshire people definitely regard themselves as being northerners. You know, whatever the Geordie folk think.
Close enough, Judith.
How long were you in Leeds for?
Well, you know, until I sort of started working, really. In fact, I only moved my mum and dad up to me 4 years ago. So. Yeah, and bizarrely, my son wants to go to Leeds as his university.
Okay, so 5 of us now live in the northeast, so I think we're okay. Rob's a bit of an interloper from Manchester, but we're spreading our wings. For those who are interested in how you get to be in the Northern Crime Syndicate, at the moment you don't, but we are talking about expanding our members at some point, I think, once we've kind of settled things down. So watch this space for news of that, I think. I'm going to go right back to the start now. Right back to the start. I met a guy at Harrogate Crime Festival, Rob Ashman. Do you know Rob? He's a crime writer.
My publisher.
Is he? Well, in the course of our conversation, again in the beer tent, obviously, he told me that he didn't read at all, anything.
Right.
And I was just completely gobsmacked with that. Because I kind of think that comes first for most people.
Sorry, you cut out for me. Who did you meet in the beer tent?
A crime writer called Rob Ashman. Nice, very nice guy. But in the course of our conversation, he told me he never read anything, didn't read any books at all, and I just couldn't believe it. So I want to take you back to your first reading experience, like where it came from, what was it? So Rob Parker, what's the first book you remember reading?
I remember it's something about a yellow dump truck. My mum and dad reading that to me over and over and over. But then I remember then from there the Richard Scarry books and something called Orme and Cheap as well that I remember a lot of. And that was all before I could I've no idea. That was before I could hold books and read for myself. And that was because you know, I'm dead lucky. Mum and dad were always really happy to read for me, so gave me a really good start. And I always wanted to be around books, but they were the definite ones I can remember from that really early stage.
Chris, you were a Lemony Snicket fan, I think. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, that was kind of sort of pre-teen. I was into them. A series of unfortunate events. But the first things I remember reading is the Noddy books, Enid Blyton. And I remember reading them a lot. And I'm sorry if I'm getting this wrong, if my mum's going to listen, but I think she stopped me reading them because there was Noddy said blast at one point and she thought I was swearing. So she stopped me reading them.
I'm sure I've said this before. I definitely think Enid Blyton, for people of a certain age anyway, is the gateway drug to crime fiction. I think that's where
Yeah.
it starts.
Yeah.
I think you read The Secret Seven and The Famous Five, and then from that moment on, you're lost to the rest, to other genres. You're a crime fan. Certainly, that's the way it worked for me. Now, Judith, I actually sent a little questionnaire out to these guys, and I got Rob's Ormond Cheap, and I got Chris's Lemony Snicket. Judith mentioned George Bernard Shaw, Oscar Wilde, and Shakespeare. I think
What can I say?
we discovered who the token intellectual is in the Northern Crime Syndicate.
I honestly, I can't remember kids' books, apart from there were two history writers called Geoffrey Trees and Henry Trees. And then I sort of went into Jean Plaidy. But I can't remember. I can't remember. I don't think at our age, I mean, correct me, Trevor, you're about my age,
Yeah,
that they did kids' books in the same way. I mean, we were sort of
you
taught
must
to
have
read.
read Enid Blyton, surely. You must have.
Well, I had a very middle class friend who read Enid Blyton, and so yeah, I saw Enid Blyton at her house, but I didn't have Enid Blyton in my house. No.
The person.
And you also,
Huh?
go on, Rob.
The person.
No, I had a friend. I had a mate who had Enid Blyton.
Oh, so
But
the books, Enid
books,
Blyton.
Yeah,
not-
yeah, but
not
I
the
didn't
night
have.
round for
I've gone
dinner.
round for a sandwich and like Enid
Yeah, she
Blyton
had
or
Enid
something.
Blyton round for tea.
Used to keep her in the cupboard, Rob. Used to wheel her out for dinner. Rob, and stuff like that. But you also said you didn't have any books in the house.
I didn't have any books in the house, apart from condensed Reader's Digest books. But my mum and dad took me to the library, every fortnight. And my gran lived with us, and I had everybody's library tickets. And so I had masses of books. It's just they weren't mine. I mean, nowadays I can't push books onto my kids. They refuse to read. But I mean, that's just not how I was brought up. It's not what we did. But we had the library, and so I had 12 library books from Crossgates Library, and then I had library books from school. So I was probably reading more than a book a week, really. A book a day, rather. More than a book a day. We didn't have phones, we didn't have sort of, much TV and stuff.
Is this like pre-war? I've lost where we are now.
Well, I don't know. I mean, Trevor,
You wouldn't tell me your age. I'm having to guess, Judith. You wouldn't tell me. You kept it.
I read Agatha Christie when I was young, okay? And I read the Bible a lot.
That's about as lowbrow as I'm going to get from you. I can see that. What about Adam? You were a Charlie and the Chocolate Factory kind of guy, weren't you?
Yeah. I think I seem to remember before that somewhere around then, sort of reading Spot the Dog. There was like a picture book.
Oh yeah.
That kind of sticks in my head. And probably
Adam, while you're talking about that, can you show us your pic that you've got saved up for us?
All right then.
Oh, that's so cute.
That's Spot the Dog. Okay, you can come back now, Adam.
That was actually taken 5 years ago. I've just had a really tough time.
You've kind of got the same shaped head that you've always had, really, I think.
Yeah, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is one of my earliest memories. I love Roald Dahl. I read that book, frequently, cover to cover. I absolutely loved it. And then I think the first time I really remember going out, obviously with parents, to buy books was the R.L. Stein Goosebump books. When I was kind of, 7-ish year old, that was all the craze, and I remember being in W.H. Smith's down in Shields. It was $2.99 when I was first buying them to buy a Goosebump book. And I used to look at them all on the shelf, and if there was like 3 copies of one book that I needed, I would like inspect it, and I would only get it if it was in perfect condition. So I was really weird like that when I was a kid.
The irony that probably all of our books are available for cheaper than that some 30 years later, I think.
apparently people haven't seen the picture.
Adam,
What?
I've just seen someone on the chat saying they didn't actually see your picture that you flashed up.
I should
You
warn
see, now, if I talk while
guys
it's
who are
on,
watching, the pictures move around when we change them, so you should be able to see it.
so if
There you
I talk, you might be able to see it now as I speak, because I might be on the main.
You can see it anyway, Adam. Please take it away again now. You disturb them. Robert, tell me
should have
about the
animated the mouth so it goes when you're talking.
Yeah.
Robert Scragg, tell us about your Mr. Men love.
Yeah, so I was probably about 5 years old, and I can't even remember which ones it was I read, but I just remember the house we had at the time. It was a little bookshelf in the corner, and it was just absolutely ram-packed full of Mr. Men books. So those are the first ones I can remember, like, anything about. The first ones I can remember actually reading, I'm just going to quickly take you out of my bookshelf, because I forgot to get them out in advance. And I've actually still got them here, which is, it's not quite as highbrow as Judith, but these are nearly 40 years old now. Those made me illustrated children's classics.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
So I've had these for, like I say, nearly 40 years. They went missing for a couple of years, and they turned up on my daughter's shelf, my eldest daughter. And she swore blind that she'd always meant to give them back when she moved out, but I managed to appropriate them. But yeah, I've read those God knows how many times. And then, similar to Adam, loved Roald Dahl as well. It was Fantastic Mr. Fox for me.
Yeah.
That was my number one pick. And then probably after that, Tolkien. I won't bother getting up again, but I've got the original copies of the Lord of the Rings trilogy and The Hobbit that I had from probably about 10 years old.
Nice.
You're veering into literary territory again now, so you've lost me. I'm reading on the chat, guys, that you didn't see Adam's picture, so we'll maybe try one more of those, and if it doesn't work, we'll give that up and we'll put them on our Facebook page at a later date. Earliest influences then for reading and possibly even writing. Quite a few of you spoke about grandparents. I think Rob Parker in particular.
Yeah. My grandma and granddad they lived in near St Helens, and they had their front bedroom had a bookcase on it that was just full of all sorts of everything you could imagine, was on there. But Grandad was a big thriller nut, and he'd always put us in front of the telly watching James Bond and stuff like that, and Indiana Jones, and like the classic, adventure serial kind of stuff. So that put me on to stories in a big way when I was very, very small. And then when I was older, I was able to go into their, front bedroom and spend some time with the bookcase, and I absolutely loved it, So I've got a couple of like really prized possessions. I've got his copy of Diamonds Are Forever right there, which it's look how it's so great, and it's just like we've all got a book that means a lot to you. That is one that means a lot to me, So yeah, that was it. It all blossomed from there.
And Chris, yours was your granddad as well, I think.
Yeah, it was my granddad. He always pushed me to read, and he'd take me out to the theatre a lot. And yeah, he just when he'd read a book, he'd just hand it down to me and tell me to read it. So yeah.
And also Judith, your grandmother lived with you, I think you said.
Yeah, she did. I was just thinking, I had an aunt who tried to stop me reading because I was reading about the Borgias, and I'm from a very Catholic family, and there were sort of tales of incest and terrible sinful behavior and murder, and she didn't think that I should be reading it, and she had a set to with my mum saying that it wasn't suitable reading material. But my mother, to her credit, said I could read what I wanted. It was up to me.
Okay. Judith, can you show us your pick? We'll make this our last experiment.
Don't think it's working.
We'll see the panel, the chat people can tell us. Can anybody in the chat room?
Everyone will have to take my word for it that I'm very cute.
Somebody tell us in the chat room if you can see that. No. Okay, put it back on, Judith.
Okay.
How very odd. That's an experiment we won't try again. I think. Adam, you had a teacher who you claimed as an early influence.
Yeah, I've had a few. I think I don't really remember. My parents must have encouraged us to read, but I don't remember them being like big readers, and they aren't now. I'm pretty sure they haven't read my books. But I was always encouraged to do well at school, and I think because English seemed to be the thing early on that I gravitated towards. My mum was always. I remember my mum wanting me to do well academically and stuff, and me kind of getting wound up when I got 9 out of 10 on the spelling test, which is a bit odd thinking, you know, some of me spelling now. But yeah, I had a teacher in infants that I remember quite well. Miss Dibble, she was called. She was just lovely. It was just one of those things where, you know, you have kind of a few teachers that stick in your mind. And I just loved school. I always kind of loved school. I got through unscathed, which is the first thing. And throughout, really, I kind of that was a really a good early influence. And apparently, I used to sleep with a picture of her by my bed when I was about 6. I don't know where I got the picture from. I certainly don't have it now. But yeah, and I think there was one from each school. Really, in juniors, I had a year 4 teacher, and I remember writing my first ever kind of 2-page of a jotter short story about an alien that came to Earth, and I had a line in there. It was somebody, the alien did something for a human who was quite nasty to start with, and the human's heart sank. And what I meant was like that they were touched by that, but obviously that's not what it means. And the teacher said, "What did you mean by that?" I said, "Well, you know, the heart sank because they were so touched by what happened." And because I said it with such confidence, I kind of got away with it. And it wasn't corrected in the story. And I've taken that forward into my negotiations as a trade union official ever since, really.
We'll come back to that later, Adam. I'm keen to look at that. Judith, you talked about a sister, Aidan?
Yeah, for English. Yeah, actually, all my English teachers were fantastic. I think that's the same for a lot of writers, really. So yeah, Sister Aidan was really encouraging. I remember we did some poem about a highwayman.
I read that poem when you mentioned it. That was hideous.
I know. It's terribly tragic. I don't want to ruin the end for people, but basically, I think he's in love with the innkeeper's daughter, is my vague memory. And then the soldiers come, and then the innkeeper's daughter ends up being shot, you know, for love of him. It's very grim, very dark.
It was a little bit rapey, I thought, when I read it.
Oh, really? I don't remember it like that. I remember the tragedy of it.
It's not the kind of thing I would be trying to encourage people to read at that age. If you would have seen the picture, you'd have seen it as a picture of Judith at, I don't know, about 3, maybe. So if you were reading that then, it explains a lot, frankly.
No, I think I was 9.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Robert, tell us about Mr. Cutting. I like the cut of his jib.
Yeah, it's a quite a cool name. He was my English teacher when I was kind of early teens. And we all thought he was like the coolest guy around, not just because he was a good teacher, but because rumour had it that he was related to a member of the Cranberries. And we never ever found out which member or whether it was true, but he just had this kind of air of mystique around him because he was kind of 2 degrees separated from someone we once saw on Top of the Pops kind of thing.
Did he go around singing Zombie quietly under his breath or something like that?
But he's one of those guys where like you could really, even at that age, you could really kind of sense the passion from him in the lessons. You know what I mean? He really kind of brought stuff to life. And if I think back at the time, like some of the stuff we had to read, I thought was quite dry. Really wasn't really my cup of tea, but we managed to kind of find a way to bring it to life a bit. And then my mum's been a really big influence as well. Right from early years, both parents encouraged me to read, but my mum's always been a big writer herself. Kind of short stories, poetry. She even had a stint getting paid to write verses for greeting cards.
Oh, I've always fancied doing that.
Cool.
Sounds fantastic, really. I
And
think
then
when I saw 500 Days of Summer, have you seen that?
Yes, great film.
It is a great movie, but I was always envious of him doing that job, writing.
Yeah.
I've come up with a way to cheat the IT, Trevor. There's my picture.
Oh, excellent.
I could get mine actually.
If our system was working, that's the photo you would have seen of Robert at some point.
Okay, right, that's mine then.
Oh, brilliant.
To be fair, if I shaved the beard off, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
I was going to say, I've never seen you without a beard, Rob, so it could be like that.
You know what, I threaten every now and again. I threaten to shave it off. I think it would freak the kids out.
Judith has always had something in her hair since a very young age. It's become a tradition now. She can't do anything else.
It saves you having to do it. When I was young, I used to have plaits right the way across. That used to like give me such a headache.
Rob Parker, I liked your story about Mrs. Twist, particularly about the launch. That was fabulous.
Yeah, she was lovely. We had her 2 years in a row, so year 1 and year 2. And she was the first person who ever put her arm around me and said, "You're all right at this, keep going at it." And when you're
Wow.
that age, it gives you loads and loads of confidence. And I'd never forgotten it. So when, for the launch of A Wanted Man back December 2017, she was my guest of honour. But she was 85, and it was up it was in an old railway station, and it was up a flight of spiral stairs, and we, it was just. But I really wanted her to be there, so we managed to get her up the stairs and get.
Tell
her.
me,
Fireman's lift.
Carry her up.
No, we didn't, but it was touch and go for a while. But it's just, honestly, it was just the most lovely thing, and she was teary about it, and it made me teary, and it was just, and it made me think, I admire teachers so much for that simple connection. And we've all spoken there really positively about these influences on us. But if it weren't for her, saying that when she did, it's like those little paths that you set young people on from a very formative age. They stick, don't they? So huge respect and love to teachers.
Yeah, mine was brilliant. I had a guy called Tom Goodluck who was absolutely fantastic. Fantastic, hugely encouraging, hugely flamboyant kind of guy. But he ran the rugby team as well, so nobody ever suspected he was a gay teacher, which he so obviously was afterwards when you thought about it. Yeah, he came out years later, and you just thought, how did I not see that? It was insane. But he was a fantastic teacher.
Again, I love the name. We've got Mr. Goodluck, Mr. Cutting.
Yeah.
I think there's a cast of characters being created right here.
Yeah.
I'm going to move on from your inspirations to your first bit of writing. Chris, you said you drew comics.
I did.
Have you got one?
Yeah.
Oh,
well, I started drawing comics. I don't think I ever finished one.
Was this, by the way, did you used to drink milkshakes when you were drawing your comics?
No, because I'm lactose intolerant.
Okay.
That's one about Quidditch there.
Oh my God, J.K. Rowling ripped off your ideas.
I know.
So you invented Quidditch? I did not know.
And then I liked Wallace and Gromit, so there's Wallace.
That's really good.
Fantastic.
Good effort, man.
You should have stuck to drawing, Chris.
Gromit.
That's good.
And there's a load of Toy Story ones. I was really into Toy Story.
Yeah,
I sometimes forget how young you are, Chris, compared to me. That's extraordinary.
So yeah, I was doing comics from a very young age, and originally I wanted to be a computer animator at Pixar, but in the end I wasn't that good at computers, so so I decided to go on the stories instead.
Rob Parker, I believe that we're going to have the great privilege of hearing you read a little bit of Dino Invasion, your first piece
Dino
of
Invasion,
writing.
yes. Dino Invasion was when I was in year 4, which is, I would have been 9. Yes. Chapter 1. Well, slightly autobiographical start. Robert was watching BBC One, and the news came on. "Here are pictures from Merseyside," said the man on TV. "Ah!" screamed the newsman's colleague. "Sorry about the violence. One of our colleagues has just been eaten by a Tyrannosaurus Rex." It does carry on in the same vein. There's some lovely,
Yeah, I think that's enough, mate.
drawings.
Thanks.
Yeah, lovely drawings. Yeah.
I'm slightly disappointed, Robert. You said you had a wonderful, epic green poem called
Yeah, I did, and it does still exist. There's a poem I wrote called "The Mighty Oak" when I was about 12 or 13, I think. And my mum's got a copy. I'm sure I've got a copy somewhere, but it was basically about what a bunch of knobs humans can be and trashing the planet and stuff like that.
You were ahead of
yeah,
your time.
I was quite proud of it at the time, and then my mum, being a bit sneaky like she can be, sent it off to a couple of magazines at the time, and it got published in a magazine.
Nice.
But I didn't see any royalties for it or anything like that. I'm sure she's got them stashed away in a sock under a cupboard or something.
Now, I heard Judith, you had some stories published, but had a slightly unfortunate side effect, I heard. Do I need to remind you of what that was?
Side effect. Well, I was a bit concerned when I went back into my childhood essays and stuff at how disturbed I apparently was as a child, because they're all terribly gothic and dark. Yeah, so I think that I could see why I would end up as a crime writer, but when I read them back, I did think possibly I should have seen someone when I was a child.
Not too late, Judith.
But didn't you tell me you had something published in the newspaper and you ended up
Oh,
getting
yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I did have a couple of pieces published in the Evening Post and something in a kid's sort of, you know, compilation book. But yeah, the Evening Post ones, they used to run your name and address and age, and I got a load of dirty phone calls after it, and we had to have a policeman come around to sort of ask me questions, because they're obviously trying to figure out if I actually knew the person or not, and they wanted me to describe him. And I basically described the policeman in front of me, because I was only a kid, you know. But yeah, I mean, they don't do things like that now. They're not stupid enough to put kids' names and addresses, you know.
God, so even in the pre-Twitter, pre-internet days, this still happened. It's amazing.
Yeah, trolled at 10.
And Chris, this is the worst title ever, but tell me about Sculpture to a Block of Marble.
Yeah, so that's my first book.
And it didn't get published. I can't believe it.
No, it didn't. Back when, you know, I thought writing was pretentious. It had to be pretentious, so it was called Sculpture to a Block of Marble. And it was about, it was about school, and it was the title was, it was a quote by some, I don't know, famous dead person probably, that said, education is to a child what sculpture is to a block of marble, or some shit, you know. So yeah, I wrote a whole story about school, and just to make it even slightly more pretentious, I wrote it all in the first person plural. So
oh my God.
Yeah.
So is that like we?
Yes, yeah.
And that is what got him here today, ladies and gentlemen.
You need to self-publish this one, man.
I've got quite a bit of it here, actually. The rest of it is lost to time, but I've got about 30 pages left of it.
Adam actually looks quite shocked there. He's like,
I think that's quite theatrical, so I'm just trying to work out his truth and lie at the minute.
Oh, okay. Adam, I've got your story. Adam didn't have his first piece of writing to hand, so he sent it to me, so I'm hoping this is going to hold up. It's very short.
Is it the one to me, Nana?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
This isn't embarrassing at all, by the way.
Again, this is not from me, this is from Adam. I hope you have had a good day. I hate going shopping. I always go, oh no, I have had a bad day. I have to have a tidy room. I love going on holiday, and I love you.
Oh.
You got that mixed up, Trevor. That was the text he sent me last night.
True story. True story.
Oh, that's
All of it.
awesome.
First piece of non-fiction.
And also, Adam, I believe you wrote a short story about a big issue seller.
Yeah, and I influenced a fairly well-known Northern crime writer known as Trevor Wood. Based on my protagonist is a homeless guy. Was I was a trailblazer.
My opening chapter is just loosely based on it. It's not stolen.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah.
Just because I saw it in a magazine. Let's move on a fraction about when you first thought about breaking into the writing world. Whether you kind of thought, I'm going to do that from an early age, or whether you thought you had to get a proper job, a bit like me. I mean, I thought about it, but then I joined the Navy and spent 16 years in the Navy, bizarrely as a writer, which is a branch in the Navy, which ultimately helped me because my character in The Man on the Street is ex-Navy, so that was quite useful.
What were you writing?
A writer is like an admin clerk in the Navy, really. They do all the paperwork, they deal with all the finances, human resources as well a bit, just the only people who aren't doing the dirty work, really, swan about in an office in nice shirts. It's a good job. Seriously. And then I went into journalism, and I know you did that, Judith, but I wondered if you thought about trying to write right from the start, or whether journalism was always going to be the path.
I'm not sure I realised you could be a writer. I sort of think you have to find your way to writing. So yeah, I became a journalist, and the good thing about that is that you're mixing with people, and you realise everyone's got a story, and you can't disregard people because sometimes the best stories are in the most simple and straightforward places. So one of my best stories was a leak show in a local pub when I worked in Newcastle for the Journal, and the winner turned out to be a man who wasn't there, but his twin brother and his very elderly, frail mother had cared for and grown his leeks, and the brother who wasn't there had been knocked down and was in some persistent vegetative state, basically, in the hospital. So I was just sent along to cover the leak show, but all human life is there.
Yeah, okay. And Judith's underselling herself a little bit there, talking about her journal leak show stories. You went on to work for several national newspapers. I was a journalist as well, but I was like the Robbie Savage to her Cristiano Ronaldo. And
but that is seriously one of my most memorable stories. Yeah, I mean, I've done bigger stories, and I've yelled, will you resign, Prime Minister, at various Prime Ministers, but actually
that quite a bit.
Right, yeah, for different reasons.
Yeah.
Let's talk about you then, Adam. You've been at war with the Daily Mail this week in your day job, I think, haven't you?
Oh, I've been riling them lot up. Well, I started out as a teacher, basically to gain Rob Parker's respect from a young age. Didn't know him, but I thought one day I might meet this guy and I want to respect me.
You always had it, mate. You always.
Yeah. I think my mum will say that when I was a young kid, I used to want to be an author. I don't really think of it like what Judith says. I didn't think it was a realistic thing. So I decided as a teenager I was going to become a rock star, of which I did send you another photo, by the way, but I'm glad that hasn't come up either.
We're not going to try the photos, I think.
No, with me tinted hair. So I thought I'd be a rock star, and I went to uni and studied music, but then came out and thought, oh, actually, what am I going to do now, because I'm not a rock star? And I got a job as a teacher, teaching music in a college, but became a union rep alongside that, and then eventually left teaching after about 7 years to work for the National Education Union, where I still am, in my kind of day job. And the writing came about whilst I was doing my PGCE. A very kind sort of tutor of mine, I read something out in class that I just did as part of a task, and he was really supportive and asked me to start sending him things. So nothing seedy, like bits of writing and that. So I used to email him stories and he'd give us feedback, and it just went from there. And it wasn't that long afterwards that I won that Writers Forum competition, So that's kind of my employment history in a nutshell. I did have a stint at IKEA in the restaurant when I was 16, which I hated. And Boots, didn't enjoy working at Boots either. But I found here, just for those who want, that's my baby photo, by the way.
Oh, there we go. We're going to get these photos out there one way or another.
Yeah.
It was light and then it went dark all of a sudden.
You look ready for a fight there, Adam, in that photo.
Oh, yeah.
I was always a bit miserable, like.
You look like you're about to shout, "Will you resign, Prime Minister?"
Yeah.
And Rob Parker, you teach as well. Was that? Did you go into teaching first or writing first? I'm never quite clear on that.
No, I don't teach. But I.
Well, you kind of teach.
Yeah, I got it. It's such a. We use the word, I think, before we came on, about serendipitous. It's such a serendipitous thing that I did I wanted to be a writer from really, really young. But very much like what I'm hearing from my other esteemed panel members is that you don't think it's available to you. So, the only people that of an industry capacity that came into our village primary school was a bird watcher. So I thought that's like, well, I suppose that's what I'm being groomed to be as an ornithologist, So I didn't know that there was this, that there were writers from all sorts of different backgrounds, and that anyone, could be a writer, and that it was really the sort of the hard work part of it that was missing rather than anything else. So once I got that into my head, I always wanted to end up writing, but I did all sorts of different jobs. But I started off at 15. I did my work experience in my village primary school again, having only left there, you know, like maybe 4 years before. And the headmaster at the time said to me, promise me you won't go into it, because it's going down the pan. Promise me you won't do it. And his words sadly stuck, and I never went into it. And it was only years later, once I'd been published, that I was approached to go into schools, you know, because, you know, I've got a daft face and a daft gob and I'm happy to talk. And they thought, like, you know, maybe it'd be good to get him in to have a chat with young people about writing in the areas that we've all grown up in. And, you know, so I thought, yeah, let's do that. And it was brilliant because I've loved every minute of this. So it's great. I've got to do the best of both at the moment. So I'm dead lucky.
And what about you, Robert? You started writing quite late, I think, didn't you?
Yeah, very much so. So I'm 45 now, and it was just almost 10 years ago that I first had a serious crack. I'd written stuff at school just because I had to. And it was probably about 10 years ago. I'd read such a kind of a glut of crime novels, and you get that bit where you think like, so it was Colonel Mustard in the library with the candlestick type of thing. And I wasn't always right. I was probably right less than half the time. But some of the ideas I had, I thought, I'm not saying mine's better, but that could work as well. And I just got to the stage where I'd had so many of these little kind of ideas as I went, and I thought, you know what, I might just give it a go. And I did, and it got nowhere. I wrote about 5,000 words, and then just life got in the way. Changed jobs, changed house.
But what about your work in human resources? Surely all life is there. There must be stuff there, surely.
Do you know what? We've joked about this a couple of times with the team I work for at the minute. If you take the names out to protect the not so innocent, you could have some absolutely belting stories. really good.
So amongst us, I mean, we've all been talking about how you need to get a proper job and do all that kind of stuff first. But now I'm going to talk to Chris about this. He literally just went, I'm going to be a writer.
Kind of, yeah. So I did film and television production at University of Cumbria for my undergraduate degree, and very quickly decided that making films is something that I couldn't be bothered with. So going away from that, just going on the screenwriting route at the start. I had a year gap where I just worked in a toy store at Christmas, and went on to a master's degree in London, and just got picked up from there.
And you developed your first book on that course? Yeah?
Yes, I did. Yeah, Guess Who was the thesis for that. Yeah.
Now, when we're all saying, "Oh no, it's important, you've got to get a job," and
I have the utmost respect for anyone who does a day job and writes as well.
Yeah, so do I. Absolutely.
I could not do it.
But I also am in awe of somebody who just says, "I'm going to be a writer," and then goes and does it off the bat. I was only thinking, I mean, I think there are very few young crime writers out there, aren't there? I'd struggle to name any. You must be one of the youngest I mean, you're on the third book now as well.
Yeah, I was kind of warned about that originally by my tutors, and they just said you're probably not going to get published. And you know, just things fell into place in the end.
Because in lots of the other arts, you know, even in theatre, there's lots of young writers, lots of young musicians who make it big early on. But certainly in crime writing, I don't know anybody really who makes it under 30.
Did Chris give any context to that comment, or did they just say it and leave it at that?
No, they made him pay for the course fees first, and then they told me wouldn't.
No, I think it's more or less just what Trevor's saying. Like, there's no kind of young crime writers out there so much. So I think in terms of what they were saying, it was just kind of, you know, they were looking at the market and seeing all the authors out there. And
Lucy Foley and Gillian McAllister are quite young, aren't they?
Yeah, I don't know Lucy.
Classed as young, by the way.
So where we're setting the benchmark.
Yeah, I mean, Adam's looking at me going, "I'm on the fringes, man. I'm."
I think I was what? I must have been. I was 31 when first book was published.
Yeah, that's old, mate.
It took us 9 years to write it.
Wait, Chris, how old were you when your first book was published?
20, just turned 27.
That's
Wow.
unbelievable, mate. And it makes your achievement all the more.
It is incredible,
you know.
mate.
Like you must have been, honestly, you must have been streets ahead with your writing, because I remember the rejections I had at 30 were like, you know, it feels like you're writing too young. You know what I mean? Like it just wasn't ready. It wasn't mature enough at all.
So when was that first point, Chris, when you thought I can do this? I think I'm gonna be a writer.
So I went to I started the course, and you know, I fully intended to give it my all. But I went to Crime Fest that first year of the course, and I did their pitch an agent thing.
Oh yeah.
Where you have 3 agents and you send in your idea, and I got a really positive response from that. So that's kind of when I actually thought that I could do it.
And what about you, Robert? When you went back to your 5,000 word thing and started to work on it, was there a moment where you thought, I think this might work?
I liked the idea from the start, to be honest, and it was, I don't know what it was that made me kind of lose focus for a while, but the thing that got me back on track was I went into a charity mountain trek with a friend of mine, Mick, and he mentioned that he'd started writing a crime novel, and I'd known him for years and never knew this. And when he mentioned that, and I thought, what? Oh, actually, I have as well. I never got past like chapter 3, but yeah, I should dig that out. And the pair of us are quite competitive, so there was this kind of almost like an unspoken kind of glance across. It was like, right, I'm finishing mine before you. And that
I think you won that one, didn't you?
I did. But even then, that was 2011, and it was 2014 before I finished the first draft of anything, and even that one didn't go anywhere. It was the second book that I wrote that got me the deal.
I remember
to get me published.
And what about you, Rob? You were into screenplays as well for a while.
I was, yeah. This goes back to another teacher, Dr. Holland, at my school. He was fiercely critical in the right way, because I needed it, you know, because I'd always loved my English, but I needed someone to tell me that I was going overboard with the description. Much like Chris, I thought pretentiousness was a big part of the deal. So when it came to describing something, you know, like I would be like, take a red case, for example. I'd be like, the red case, you know, it was oblong but fat at the same time. You know, all this kind of like absolute nonsense. And I got, he said, you need to tone down your description. And I started falling in love with movies at that point. And then the geography of a screenplay became attractive to me, because your action and description has to be so on point, brief and precise. And no longer could I go on to about how fat a red case was. It was just, there's a red case. And that's it. That's all you got time for. And so I wrote screenplays from 16 to 29, and a couple of stage plays in that as well. And that really helped me, actually. You know, it really helped me with dialogue for a start. But I acted quite a bit during that time as well, because I wanted to know what it would be like to, from a writing perspective, I wanted to know what it would be like to actually say the words that I was writing. But some of the screenplays I wrote were absolutely awful, and I've got, you know, I love them. I love the fact there was Jurassic Park 3 before there was a Jurassic Park 3, which was Jean-Claude Van Damme fighting dinosaurs. There was, you know,
there's a bit of a dinosaur theme going on in you.
It really is, isn't there? Yeah, but it definitely set me on the right path, so that when I sat down to actually go back to prose, it was like, wow, I can do this now, I can do that now.
Okay. And Chris, did you, when you were doing your film stuff, did you act as well?
I didn't act. No, I not when I was doing the film stuff. I didn't act. I solely did writing and directing.
And did you drink milkshakes at all during that period?
No, because I'm lactose intolerant.
Okay. I think I'm conscious of the time. I knew this would run long, so I think we're going to have to come back to your lies and truths, and I'm hoping that people in the chat room are going to help me out here. So let's go to Adam. We have no clue here whether Stuart McBride commented on his crutch or Val McDermott told him to F off. Anybody got anything for me? I'm leaning.
Somebody earlier on said that it's the sort of thing Val would do.
That is
Adam, what was the comment about your crotch?
Well, I was at a library in Bolton. I mean, Stuart McBride was published and whatnot then, but he wasn't like as well known as he is now. But I was reading his stuff, so there was me and a load of like typical library folk who were there, and So yeah, he explained that there's a lot of bad language in his books, and if everybody was offended by that, could they let him know? So everybody's hand, bar mine, went up. So he had to, like, you know, it was this whole process. But anyway, I asked him a question after he'd read, and I had my legs crossed, but like one over the top of the other, like kind of like that. And before he answered it, he looked at us as I asked the question, went, "Oh, I'll answer your question, but I'm in no way put off by the fact that your crotch is staring right at me." And then he answered the question.
There's so much detail. I'm going for Stuart. I'm going for that as the truth.
I'm saying Val.
I'm going Stuart.
I think both are right.
Yeah, no, I've actually never met Val McDermott, but I had a good backstory to that to make it sound true. So,
I'm ahead of the game. Now we're over to Judith, whether she exposed her husband as a national figure of ridicule in the Financial Times, or she tucked her skirt in her knickers in the Penguin office. I'm looking at chat, but I'm getting no help, guys. Come on. I think your Financial Times exposing your husband as a figure of ridicule is probably true.
yeah.
I'm going for that too.
Yeah.
I'm going for Penguin.
Adam?
Dan
I
thinks
think it's the Financial Times, because I know it was a big deal, that blog, so maybe it did get picked up in that way and sort of.
The Financial Times is a lie. It was the Sunday Times.
that doesn't
And I did indeed have conversations about my first book deal with, the run up to it. I did have my skirt tucked into my knickers as I walked through the Penguin office. And even worse, you know how in the publishers' offices they have lots of books that they've published? So I was standing admiring all the books in a glass-walled office, and my soon-to-be editor, her assistant, had to come in and tell me that the entire office was highly amused at the state of me.
Don't. Oh, dear.
I feel your pain, Judith. Rob Parker, remind me of yours.
That I was in an a cappella singing group with Dermot O'Leary, or that I blagged my way into a Berlin nightclub by pretending I was a City player.
Which City player?
It was Michael Johnson.
Why would you choose a City player?
Well, it was one of those things. They at the time they'd just come into a load of money, and everyone in Europe knew about them. So yeah, went with that.
No, what about Michael Johnson, man? How are you?
What did you and Dermot sing together?
Well, I hate saying it, but we did quite a lot of barbershop stuff. So there's a lot of "Fly Me to the Moon." So yeah, it was a bit, it was a short-lived thing, obviously.
We got one vote for Berlin and one vote for oh no, we got 2 votes for Berlin. Danny Marshall says Dermot O'Leary is a rapper.
He did that during the chorus breaks, actually. He did,
You've thrown
Quick
it
vote,
now.
guys. We're running out of time
I'm
here.
with Danny. I think Berlin's true.
We're all going Berlin. Everybody's going Berlin.
Berlin's true.
Yeah. Okay. Chris.
Yeah.
Milk or acting? I think it's milk.
Look at this guy. That's
That's very cute.
Yeah.
For context, I've just eaten a big wheel of cheese.
Oh.
So that's why I'm screaming. I don't know. What do you think?
I can't comment on yours, Chris, because I know yours.
Yeah.
Amateur actor.
Yeah, actor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am. Yeah. Yeah.
Who haven't we done? Robert. We haven't done you.
Me.
Newcastle United impersonator.
Mistaken for Keith Gillespie and signed autographs for kids in the car park. All right,
Were you thinner then?
Vastly so. I was about 3 stone lighter then.
I'm looking for help. I'm getting
What was the other one? The footballer or
Either the footballer or I had like regular lottery numbers I put on every week.
Oh yeah, right.
One more week, and I missed out on 5 in the bonus ball.
I can see the Keith Gillespie thing a little bit. So
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody's going Keith on the chat. We're going for Keith Gillespie.
Keith is true.
Yes.
And I even put an Irish accent on for them as well.
Did you?
Let's hear it.
Absolutely.
It's like Belfast, really.
Well, he was Northern Irish?
Yeah, he was. He was Northern Irish.
All right.
More like an Ian Paisley kind of thing. You need.
I think I've done all of you, haven't I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at the Q&A now.
Do we have any Q&A?
Yeah. Dan has said, what was it like to write so many female characters for your new book, Chris? What were the struggles and the positives?
I mean, you always, when you're writing female characters as a man, you always want to not go overboard, not actually, you know, try and think about it too much. You want to just make them believable characters first, and then you kind of want to add on the fact that they're not my gender. And yeah, I'll answer that more in depth another day, I think. But I could go on for ages about that. Yeah,
I think I often say it helps living in the Northeast. If you want to write strong female characters, this is the area to live in, because you're surrounded by them.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's not that hard.
Yeah.
Can I throw the Northwest into that as well?
Well, you can, but I don't. I think they're not as hard.
Yeah.
Ooh, I know a few who beg to differ.
I'm looking at wrapping up. We've got about 4 minutes left. Just to let everybody know that we're kind of doing all kinds of things on social media at the moment. We've got book reviews going on our Facebook page every week now from a couple of us each time. Not our own books, I hasten to add, other people's books. We're also doing giveaways. We've just done Judas, and we're about to do a Rob Scragg book giveaway. So if you keep your eye on Twitter, there'll be an announcement on there very soon. And Adam has just recorded the very first Northern Crime Syndicate podcast, which I'll now hand over to him to tell you all about.
Oh, hello. Yeah, so the plan is we are going to try and get one out every week, every fortnight at kind of most, line up all different authors. Chris and I hosted the first episode, and that's with Judith O'Reilly. I'll not tell you who the second guest is that we've got lined up. I'm assuming they're lined up. Rob Scragg has a bit of work to do there. So each week we'll get a different author in, and we'll be interviewing them about their life and their experiences and their writing. So it's going to be available on all different platforms. It's not yet on iTunes, but I'm waiting for the email to tell me it is. But if you do search Northern Crime Syndicate podcast on Spotify and other places like, is it Google Podcast, sorry, and Radio Public or Anchor FM. If you search Northern Crime Syndicate podcast, you'll find it there. So please do subscribe and tell all your friends about that. And we will we'll bring out more interviews on a weekly basis, hopefully.
Brilliant. I should add as well that for future panels, we are intending that now and again we will have guest writers on here. If you've got any ideas as to who they should be, please notify us on our Facebook page or on Twitter or whatever.
Stuart McBride would be good, eh?
I hear he's a big fan of yours.
Trevor, we've got a question in the Q&A here.
Oh, have we gone?
Yeah, it's Leslie Turrell. Do you practice things that your characters do? Fly planes, etc.? So I'm reading that as like, if our characters have a hobby or something like that, do you go try it? Or...
I'd take a shed load of drugs and get drunk a lot.
I don't know if you've seen, I popped a comment on, I genuinely did get my wife's help to work through a fight scene last week. I got to stand up in the conservatory and we kind of like went through it kind of move by move.
Yeah. It's funny, with like the pair of us, Rob, boxing, when it comes to a fist fight, I understand the dynamics of that so much more now through actually being in a boxing ring.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, and what it's like to get knocked out as well. Although we don't talk about that moment too much.
It's never happened, Rob, I wouldn't know.
Oh, mate. In front of 30 of my nearest and dearest.
Guys, I've got to move things on. We've got about 2 minutes left, and as is tradition, the host generally does a reading. Luckily, I've chosen a very short piece, so I'm going to read from the very, very start of The Man on the Street, which I don't think I've read out loud before, but it's only about a page and a half. Bear with me. So this is the opening chapter to The Man on the Street. Leazes Park, Newcastle, June the 1st, 2012. Jimmy didn't have a watch. He liked watches well enough, but these days they were more used as currency. The last time he'd found one in a bin behind one of the big houses in Jesmond, he'd swapped it for some dog biscuits. It didn't matter because he could always tell what time it was, or near enough has made no difference. Like now. It was somewhere between 3 and 3:30 a.m. He used to be more precise, always within 10 minutes, one way or the other. But since they brought in the late licensing laws, the mixture of noise and light from the bars and clubs had messed with his head, and he was sometimes out by an hour or more. It was easier here, though, quieter. Leazes Park wasn't his normal patch. but he liked to keep on the move. It was harder to hit a moving target. His favourite spot when he came back to Newcastle 6 months ago now was just behind Greg's in the main street. The warmth generated by the oven seemed to stick around all night. When you were hungry though, the lingering smell of cheese pasties could drive you insane. On the plus side, you sometimes found a few in the bins, past their sell-by date, but good enough for the likes of him and Dog. Then some bastard put spikes in the ground to stop people crashing there. This wasn't a bad spot though. The late night revellers tended to stay clear. No one wanted to walk home through a dark park, not even the nut jobs. So the chances of someone pissing on you in your sleep were pretty low, unlike on the street where you were invisible by day and a wanker magnet by night. He'd found a spot under an old beech tree behind the tennis courts where he and Dog could rest up, where no one could see him. He could see them though. There were others here, some he knew, some not. It used to be same old, but new faces on the street were common now, more so during the day when the pretend beggars appeared, but even at night the numbers were growing. He could make out a shape on the bench near the path that ran along the top of the bank, underneath the only lamppost still working. At least they hadn't messed with the benches. A lad from York had told him that the council there bolted armrests onto the middle of them to stop people sleeping. Gadge reckoned one of the Polish lads used to crash in a tree on the edge of the park for safety. Daft bastard broke his arm when he fell out. Good job the hospital was just across the road. Jimmy didn't really believe that one. Gadge told a good story, but mostly that's what they were, stories. A crack from somewhere behind made him jump. Jimmy sat up, hugging his sleeping bag around him and putting a restraining hand on Dog, who was on his feet, growling softly. He looked around. Though the moon was hidden by thick clouds, his night vision was working well. One of the bonuses of sleeping like whatever the opposite of a baby was. An old man? A dead man? That couldn't be right. Dead men sleep great. Thank you. 1 minute over, not too bad. Thanks very much, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I know a lot more about you than I did before. I hope all our attendees enjoyed it. We will be back in a couple of weeks, possibly with a Whose Crime Is It Anyway? Looking at Rob Parker for a nod. We will let you know, but we will be back in about 2 weeks with our 5th panel. Thanks for joining in, and we'll see you again in a couple of weeks. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers,
Bye.
bye-bye.